Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Traffic lights. That's not a very good excuse, though. Today, we have a work session on from Health and Human Services regarding affordable housing requests for proposals and other miscellaneous items for our consideration. So Gina, welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you. Try to get this mic right from the beginning. Okay, so I came back at the request of the board, heard a work session last week about youth shelter. We had some discussion about issuing a potential RFP. So I'm here today to kind of talk through that. I really, for myself to draft an RFP, I have two questions for the board. One is about the scope of the RFP. Would we want to drill it down to go out for bid for a specific project, or would we keep it more broad where it references the document recording fees, it references the 5-year plan to address homelessness, and be able to get proposals for a variety of projects? And then my second question is about the budget. We typically put an up to amount in the RFP, so a number amount to issue with the RFP in terms of the funding. So to just throw a number out there, we would typically see in the RFP, a not to exceed amount of $1 million or something like that. So those are really my two questions in terms of an RFP if we want to move forward with drafting and posting one with document recording fees.
So my first question for you, though, then is how much money do we now have that has not been allocated? I think we've got some smaller projects and then the two big affordable
projects.
Housing projects.
So we have about 2.7 million in document recording fees in the bank. We know that we collect document recording fees throughout the year, so they will continue to come in throughout 2023.
What's our budgeted income for 2023?
Let's see. Probably about $1 million.
Is that what we put in the budget?
I'm not sure that we put a specific amount in the county budget. What we anticipate for 2022, when I look at last year, we anticipate that amount to be just under $1 million, or right at $1 million. We're still waiting on December revenue. So looking, it's hard to project because we don't know what will happen with the housing market, and these fees depend solely on that. Looking at 2021, we received 1.4 million in revenue in 2021, and now 2022 about $1 million. So depending on what the housing market does in 2023, that will determine the revenue.
Okay. And then we typically use how much of that $1 million? Because I know there's not very many, but I think there's maybe one program that's ongoing.
So we have a couple programs that we have funded the last few years with document recording fees in the amount of about $423,000.
And those are continuing?
Those contracts will be up in front of the board in the next few weeks to consider renewal of those.
So basically about 600,000 to add to the 3.7.
So we have the 2.7, and then you said
2.7, sorry.
Yep. If all of those regular contracts renew, that would be about $423,000 for 2023.
Okay. So the 2.7 should only be considered for one-time only expenditures, because obviously that's not ongoing revenues.
Right.
Okay.
We have that fund balance because of unspent revenue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions?
When you say in the bank, this is like net, this covers for what we've given to Campus Towers and the others. So
Correct.
this is net. There's nothing that's obligated out of this 2.7.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Mortensen? So you suggested that one option is to simply make reference to the law dealing with the use of the document recording fees. That would be either for homelessness or affordable housing,
Correct.
or combination of the two.
Mhm.
Okay. So I guess our first question is, do we want to tailor it down to, we had one presentation last week from Community House for a youth homelessness program. And that would be one approach that we could specify youth
Shelter.
homeless youth
Mhm.
shelter programs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is that?
I don't typically like to limit myself. I'd probably prefer it a little broad. I think they had a nice presentation, but I don't think our duty is to look at a broad picture. So that would be my suggestion.
Arn?
I think systems get very complicated when we conflate the two. And I'm concerned about efficiency in the long term. So there's some things when if you build something like a Campus Towers, it's going to be there next year and the year after. So you're actually doing something with the money. And that's the kind of thing that is reminiscent of an infrastructure where you have to put the money out today and you can collect rent on it, which you should if you can, into the future, and that helps keep things going. But the initial seed capital. So I want to be careful that we don't encumber ourselves with something that requires constant pay. It's like we buy software and we forget that you pay a maintenance fee every year, if nothing else. So I also am having trouble, maybe you can help. In the case of Housewa, it's pretty clear that they do a great job, and Housewa is an organization that kind of owns the apartments.
Mhm.
And I think if we go out to expand that, we already have an excellent model there, and it's doing a good job. So that would be attractive to me. If we turn it over to some private entity to try and build something, I have to say, are we picking winners and losers? I don't know how to do that. I don't think anybody really knows how to do that. Do you have any idea? Like, maybe you could pick out of a dream or two, kind of extreme examples.
So if I understand your comment, Haswa, for example, has a number of units that they've managed over time that look nice. They appear to be ran well, that type of things. How would we pick another entity to do that and have that same outcome? Is that sort of what you're getting at?
That's a valid interpretation. Also, it doesn't have to be a different entity. If Housewa is doing a good job and so forth, you might argue, why not pay into it again?
Okay.
But I think it is dangerous to put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. One of the things in the RFP, and I think we could hint at this either way, whether we, drill down to a specific project or keep it more broad, is that we can look at qualifications of an agency. So they would have to for example, demonstrate that they have a track record of doing the type of service that they're proposing and describe to us what that experience is and whatnot. So that would get to sort of their experience with doing the particular project or managing units or that type of thing. So that is part of the RFP that we would ask for that from any respondent to explain to us what that experience is.
If we do that, could we expect respondents to come out of Family Promise, say?
Potentially. I mean, I don't
Okay,
think,
so they're not disallowed for some reason.
I don't believe so. I think you're hinting at because they're a religious organization.
Family Promise, I don't believe operates apartments. I think they're all kind of, I don't believe they own apartments, do they? To your
No, I don't
knowledge?
think so.
So that would be quite a bit different from
Mhm.
the housing authority that operates that. Same thing. Program like Oxford House would fit because I think they have
Yeah.
ownership.
Which is house law.
Yeah, and also.
But it goes back to what our colleague said, which is we don't necessarily want to narrow it down. We heard a proposal from Community House that was pretty expensive and fairly narrow. And this may be something that isn't quite as expensive and isn't quite as narrow, but if there's a demand for that, I mean, ideally, we would have no demand because we get enough private housing out there that
Mhm.
the only housing we have is the for the chronically impaired or something like that, where
Yeah.
So help me out, Gina, the request from HASWA originally included a request for case management,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
And are they assuming that the 750,000 includes that request for ongoing?
That was part of their proposal.
Okay.
The request, as written in the proposal, if I recall correctly, was, and the funding that was awarded includes a 1-year cost.
Mhm.
And then the board could consider renewing that after 1 year.
Right. The reason that becomes important, I think, at least what I think we need to remember is that annual revenue is what we should designate for ongoing support because, but it's the one time only, the stuff that we've saved up and haven't spent yet. That's very appropriate to me for capital improvements. But I think you had mentioned you don't want to use the capital if it gets into ongoing
Ongoing program.
programmatic support.
Mhm.
So even the group home that you talked about, that money was designated for case management, which my understanding is they've only been using about a third of that in the last several years, which was
Mhm.
news to me. I hadn't heard that until just recently.
is-
So we just have to, I think you kind of have to remember the two tracks, what's available for capital purchases, and then what's available for ongoing programs.
And that's something else that could be specified in the RFP as well, as we're looking for one-time,
Yeah,
startup costs or one-time projects.
that would, for my seat, that would be my preference. I hate we get tied into operations, what I call operations. It just never seems to end. I'm much more favorable with the one-time capital and they take care of the operation.
Yeah,
If they can't cover the operations, then I don't even know why they're around.
the thing I like about that is that if it's properly capitalized, then the maintenance on it can be gotten from the tenants.
Right.
The people that occupy these things should have a skin in the game responsibility. But the house is building new apartments. I thought that's what we contributed the $750K for.
That's what the majority of the funding is for. There was a small part, I think it was $60,000, if I remember right, that they proposed for case management at the new units for individuals at the new
With
units.
no obligation into the future on our part.
Well, there's never any obligation to go on into the future. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I remembered 80,000, but you know, we kind of rolled it over into 750 because oh.
Have we confused you?
No?
So I think we concluded only for capital. Now, in the case of Housewater, there was 10% was for non-capital. And do we want to put a limit that says that? I don't know that you'd put that in the RFP, but in a discussion subsequent, that might come up. The only reason I'm saying, even like with Community House on Broadway, we put funding out to get training such that they could bootstrap up in the future, people eligible to of the Medicaid license type or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, I remember it was, they had asked for, they have purchasing of 1.9. That was for the property and remodel. And then there was some extra money, part of that request for something else. Well, hopefully we can hear from those folks today and clarify that, but.
And then even here, we know that Community House on Broadway is short $700,000 to $800,000 for their refurbishing, remodeling of Community House on Broadway. And I don't know, how should we think about that? To drop the house of price, the price of housing, you add more housing. Does this add more housing? Not really. Is it a good thing? Yeah. How should we think about that?
Well, it depends on the goal that we have for Cowlitz County. If it's just adding additional affordable housing, that certainly meets the criteria, but it doesn't address all the criteria, which I think we have the discretion to decide, as long as it is consistent with the plan that we're operating under, which, if I remember correctly, was so broadly worded, just about everything fits, right?
There's a lot of options within there. Yeah.
I mean, subsidies for private individuals, those are different programs.
Right.
Yeah.
So we could conceivably grant the Community House on Broadway for the refurbishing of their current facility. How should I call that?
Renovations.
Yeah, but the location,
Broadway.
that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we keep the RFP more broad, then that would allow for those different types of projects to be included.
Well, let me ask the board, do we need an RFP just to sit here and say Community House on Broadway has a long history of community involvement, community support. They've gotten a lot of funding out of the community. That speaks pretty loudly. They've been at least half, if not more, funded by private donations over time. So, and they have a model there where I don't have to worry my pretty little head about, is it capital or is it mental health stuff? It's just like, we'll call it capital and keep our head clear. Are we allowed to do that?
I don't know.
I think the county's procurement policy outlines going out for bid when you're considering making awards, especially awards that might be a larger in amount. I might suggest connecting with legal to see if there's any I don't know what the parameters are around that. I know, the advice we've always been given is we have to go out for bid and do awards through an open competitive process. But I don't know if there's anything legal around that or if it's just county policy. With that.
I wonder, do we have Doug on at all?
I don't know if he's,
I see Tracy. Do you know Tracy at all?
You could run the risk of having others, fairly upset that they didn't get a chance to put a proposal in.
That's not a risk, it's a certainty.
Yeah. So, and I'm okay with that if you think what we're doing is, if we all think what we're doing is the best that we have at this point in time, I'll shoulder that, but you do run that risk.
Well, maybe that's something on your list to inquire about.
Sure.
well, I know we have folks in the audience. So I want to make sure we give you an opportunity to weigh in. You've kind of heard our questions and the dilemma that we're facing. If you want to share with us, please approach the witness table and make sure the green light is on and have your way with us. No, that's not the right phrase to use, but
And you have a hand up. You have a hand up from Tracy.
we do.
Yeah.
Hi, Tracy. We do have somebody approaching the bench, but go ahead. You have a question for us or an answer?
She's probably being promoted.
Sorry,
There
I
she
needed
is.
brought over. I
Yes.
did put a chat in there that I would open it up to everybody. So the community, even though this may be, the option the board goes, you can, I would open it to all. I don't know in the purchasing rules, but I think to be fair to the community, I think you should open it to all.
Thank you. All right.
Can I ask one more question of Gina? When we did these in private enterprise, we'd have some parameters in there. We would ask, how would it meet? This is a need we see, or this is something we see. How would it meet that type of thing? Is that appropriate for these type of RFPs?
The board could specify, we have a particular interest in X, Y, and Z type of projects, like projects that, increase affordable housing in the community. We reference the 5-year plan, of course, within that as well. So it kind of refers back to that. And the respondents have to tell us how their proposal meets one of the goals within the 5-year plan. So they have to connect it back that way.
Okay. I was just thinking more general questions, like what would they see the benefits to this community be?
What would the benefits? to the
Benefits
community?
and if they see any negatives, if this happens, is there possibly some negatives? I'm big about helping, but I'm not big about helping that hurts, causes stress on others.
Right.
So just those kind of thoughts from whoever's putting something in, I guess I want to know that they've thought that through and want to see what they think.
Sure. I think there's some language in here that hits on some of that.
It's on that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll take a look through though, and I can share it with you. too.
Would you be open to specific language about ensuring that neighborhoods are protected, that type of
Yeah, I just, and
narrative?
yeah, I just want to know, I don't think it's a help if you're hurting others. It's just a transfer of burden. So I look for those type of things. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take your time.
Yes, sir. Welcome.
Right. My name is Scott Carson, I'm resident of Longview. I just wanted to kind of give you a little different perspective that I have. My wife's been a teacher for over 30 years. And so I hear the stories, I hear how the family dynamic has changed over the years. And I don't really see where that's going to change for the better in the future. These kids, I was shocked. I think it was a radio article I heard when I was driving about the number of homeless kids that are unaccompanied or don't have a parent that they're going to shelter with, even if the parent is homeless. And that was really shocking to me because I don't live within that world and I'm not exposed to that as much as, of course, everyone in our community has been exposed to the homelessness. And I don't think this even qualifies to be underneath that cap of homelessness. I think this got to qualify from coming from your heart to help these children. These kids, as we see from some of the surveys and some of the information that's out there, that a lot of people in our society that are homeless, they make a choice. They've made that choice to go that route, no matter how many times you guys are trying to help them, or whether it's a pallet home camp or whatever it is. They've made that choice and they've made it clear that they really don't want to change. Our most vulnerable people in our society are these kids, and they don't get that opportunity to make that choice at this young age, right? They're wondering where their next meal's coming from. They're wondering where they're going to sleep at night. Are they going to couch surf? Are they going to wear out their welcome somewhere? And just absolutely no stability. And that is really heartbreaking. And when I heard this article on the radio, it really opened my eyes. Even though I hear it from my wife too, talking about some of the family situations that these children come from. And there's been a lot of tears in our house from her coming home, talking about this over 30 plus years. And it just keeps getting worse. So, you know, these kids need help some way. I didn't really know anything about this situation that Community House is bringing forward until yesterday. I'm like, wow, that really fills a gap, because these kids don't have a place to go. I have friends that are high school coaches and teachers. If you really, you know, as much as Longview School District, Kelso School District, and their spokesmen want to come and talk to you about this, I tell you, go talk to the coaches and the teachers. You know, right? Of what's going on in these homes and what these kids have to do. If we've been a longtime supporter of the closet at RA Long, where you're bringing clothes and you're bringing food, and our eyes were opened by a coach over there that told us about the kids that are homeless, about the kids that don't have shoes to wear and coats to wear and food to eat. And so this is a need in this community, just such a deep need in our community that I think we overlook because we get bombarded by the homeless camp in Alabama and the people on the street corners. And we also get jaded to it. First one to tell you, absolutely jaded to it a little bit. But I'm not jaded to the plight of children and young adults that are going to be adults someday. If we don't take care of them now, we're going to pay for them later by taking care of them in the jail and things of that nature. So these kids, they need some kind of structure, their program that Community House can provide. You know, that they need some stability in their life, that they know that they have a place to go. And above all, they need that feeling of safety. And, you know, I've dealt, my son years ago worked with Frank at Community House. I know their model and I support their model. You know, I think they do accountability, right? And you have to be accountable. I think that's what we're missing in our society overall. I think that's really what we're missing in our current situation to help the homeless, is lack of accountability. And that's a whole nother subject I could talk to you all about some other time. But these kids need a break. You know, they need not to worry about where they're going to be at night. And they need support and guidance and everything that Community House provides to their adult population. It's just a natural that they can provide that to these kids that are even more vulnerable. And, you know, let's take care of a molehill before it becomes a mountain. You
So-
know, let's help these kids. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate those comments. I want to ask three clarifying questions first. I didn't quite get your name. You offered it at the beginning.
That's Scott Carson.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
And the second thing is one of the surprising statistics on homeless youth is the number. It seems to be equivalent to the size of grade schools,
Yes.
but we've also discovered that that includes staying with grandparents.
Yeah. Oh,
And so
Great
that
point.
number is inflated a little bit.
well,
And if I understand it, the third thing was, if I understand correctly, Frank talked to us last week, basically about a 24 unit facility for helping the youth, for those that are in serious jeopardy. They don't have the grandparents to
Sure.
help with. And so again, that's a specific number and a specific goal, which I think
sure.
is.
Well, you
is,
know,
helpful.
just like our homeless and our population we have now, we're not going to help everybody.
Mhm.
But you know, gosh darn it, if you can help one person.
Mhm.
Now, I'm going to tell you a quick story that came in as a side. I just talked to Tricia back there when I walked in about someone that we knew mutually. And when I knew this young man years ago, I bailed him and his friend out of jail. They helped buy them diapers. I did all these kinds of things for this young man. And guess what? Into probably his early 40s now, that young man's became a doctor of physical therapy. And he came from a family of drug users. Okay, so that is a success story that I want to hear more about.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, I just urge you, you know, you can go buy a cheap pair of tires, or you can buy a set of tires that's going to get you 100,000 miles. I don't think it's always about the cost of someone that comes in and gives you the lowest bid. I think anyone that's been a businessman, you know, it's not always the lowest bid is the best deal, right? Well, I just look at the history of what Community House has done in our town, and I'm very thankful for that compared to how others have operated. And they have all the facilities and all the assets built to help. And filling this gap for this vulnerable population is more important than filling the gaps on Alabama Street. Now, that's just, as I said, that's a whole nother topic that I could get into, but I just really appreciate the opportunity to spout off. I don't have all the answers, but I sure the hell have a lot of opinions. So anyway,
I appreciate that.
We appreciate you coming by.
One of the interesting things, the language that we use on these issues, it helps to define what we get. And there is a difference between a request for proposal
sure,
and going out for bid.
absolutely.
Going out for bid means we
Yeah.
take the lowest responsible bid, but the request for proposals includes the narrative on what the goals are and what what is designed, and then it's up to the deciders to figure out, well, are the proposers credible? Do they have the experience? And we haven't always gone with the most experienced people, and that's gotten us into trouble in the past. I think
Oh.
Gina would even agree on something like that. But so request for proposals gives us a lot more information, and we're not bound to go with the lowest responsible bid. We're looking for the best quality product.
Well, I appreciate that education. Anyway, so that's my input.
Thank you.
And I found out about this yesterday and from talking to my wife, talking to friends of mine that are in the coaching at the high school level and teaching. I'm going, wow, if there's one thing that I'm going to come and see if I could throw my 2 cents out, which is worth a lot less now than it was a few years ago, then this is something I'm going to get out of my comfort zone a little bit and share my feelings. And I guarantee you that publicly, if this type of thing got out there more often, I think you'd have a heck of a lot of support in the community to fill this gap for these kids.
So we've earlier discussed about having a request for proposal that was more broad-minded, looking at what the law allows. You're suggesting narrow it down to the unhoused youth.
I understand not wanting to be boxed into a corner and having the more open to what you can facilitate to. My only problem with something like that is that you're going to get a lot of static, a lot of noise. That maybe we're not narrowing in on one thing to try to take care of one specific problem. You know, but anything to get this on the agenda moving forward is a positive for our community.
Okay.
And I've really, my eyes have been open from what I heard before on the radio, and I think it was someone from the Kelso School District that actually had spoke about it on one of the local radio programs. And my ears perk up because my wife's a teacher in Kelso. So
Great.
anyway, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you,
I
Scott.
appreciate you taking time.
So there isn't anything you said that hasn't gone through my mind 1,000 times. I've been talking over the years about trying to focus on the youth. I haven't made much progress. I don't like our detention center because that's not very constructive and it's very expensive. I've also mentioned, but I do agree with you on focusing on the youth for a lot of reasons, and you've mentioned majority of them. But I don't know that your analysis of how to treat it is accurate. I have seen nothing but failures, principally because the fundamental problem is lack of family.
Lack
It's
of what?
lack of a family.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
And so you're trying to make up a family outside. I've got 2 daughters that are teachers, and the kind of language they're subjected to by young people is amazing.
Absolutely.
I do not know that we could say the community house on Broadway, by their expertise with adults, is going to translate into the youth on a uniform basis. By that, I mean people coming in the door with a certain kind of problem or attitude. You've got to fight society, and you can't fight society in the way typically that's prescribed. It's not an issue of a bed. I've talked to Frank a few times on this too. It's and Judge Hahn. You really need the tutelage, almost a one-on-one kind of thing. So we have to decide, going back to the very first question, is this something we're going to invest in capital? Because we don't need a lot of capital. What we need is a lot of counselors, a lot of tutors. In tutors, I mean in the big picture. I don't mean a math tutor. I mean a life counselor. And that's one side of an argument. The other side that you and most people try to do is set aside the cost as if cost is not a factor. Cost always is a factor. And I give the best illustration. Community House on Broadway came out with the response to the Camp Alabama RFP, and they were a factor of 4 cheaper than what's at Camp Alabama 2 now. Well, there's this thing called opportunity cost. And you know that quite well because you're a businessman. I know Rick also knows that quite well. He's a businessman. So it isn't just like, well, a couple of anecdotes and great. As a matter of fact, I found it interesting when Frank presented some of the people and their anecdotes, and they were quite specific about bragging about people going through these adversities and going to LCC and graduating and doing other great things, joining the service and becoming gainfully employed. And to complete the picture, I would have loved them to say, maybe that adversity is better than what we typically see in high school, because I get nothing but story upon story of graduates of high school who can't seem to help themselves. I'm using a euphemistic approach here. And so the focus on eliminating some discomfort is something I go back to. The real problem is you got to have somebody who loves you. The world out there is mean. It's going to say, Scott, you're ugly and your grandmother wears combat boots. And you got to go home and your mom has to kind of say, don't worry about that. You're valuable and all that, and give you inspiration. That's the seed. Anything we do here, I think we have to do as a Band-Aid, but let's not fool ourselves that it's a solution.
Well, let me respond a little bit. Number one, absolutely. If this was the early 40s and 50s where we actually had more of a nuclear family and mom stayed at home and it was almost a sin to get divorced, that's one thing, but we're not in that position now. Any support system is better than no support system. That's saying, you know, you pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. So any support that these kids can get from any source when they are especially distressed is of the utmost importance. A hand up, not a handout that we're talking about. And absolutely, cost is always a factor in everything. Unfortunately, you know, we don't live in this la land of everything is free and we're gonna, you know, rob Peter and pay Paul, and then so pretty soon Paul's got nothing. But I think the attractive thing about an organization like Community House, whether it's Community House or not, as a teacher, Dennis, you can probably say something. You have came across kids that are so damn angry at their circumstances and angry at the world. And they need help. My wife's a second grade teacher. And I hear her, she goes, I don't know where this kid's going to go by the time he's in 4th or 5th grade. He is so mad all the time. And the reason why he's so mad all the time is because he doesn't have that parental support, or he's been abused at the home, or he sees other kids that are getting parental support and they're envious and they're mad because they don't have that. Why sure in the heck would rather have that kid have the availability to go to a counselor and get some mental health counseling and help them than to be become a mad adult.
I'll tell you why on that. Because kids go through phases, everyone. I ran away from home once. I had a neighbor's kid come to our place, a teenager crying. He had a fight with his parents. We put him up for the night, communicated with the parents and helped on that. The reason I bring that up is because we've got about however many children we have, and it's very tough growing up in society as it is now because we have too many options, as my mom explained to me at one time. But in any event, we're talking about 12 beds times 2, male, female. If you're unhappy in the example you gave, you just can't go to community house and say, hi, I'm unhappy and will you take me in? And they'll say, please take a number. I mean, I know Frank wouldn't do that, but he's going to have to. The demand is so huge. So it then becomes an issue of cost. How do we fix this? Part of what I wanted to do is to buy farms because they're retiring farmers and they would like to help kids learn things. And as soon as a kid has a sense of responsibility, they have a cow to milk or plants to plant and all that, life becomes different, more worthwhile. We can't even get it. We can't get traction on that, but that's beginning to help.
And
So I
that's
know
what-
one of the things that intrigued me a lot about the proposal that Frank had mentioned is, what do you do with these kids when they are in your custody? And his program is they've got to have a program. They've got to be linked up with a work training program, if that's possible, an internship program, going to college, going to Running Start, any of those things. So they've got to have a plan. And of course, having a plan is one of the key elements in being successful. And the kids that are roaming without any guidance don't plan. They're in survival mode.
Right.
And that's where the temptation comes in. We had a homeless shelter right on this campus where In the morning, you're out and you're on your own, period. Not surprising that it quickly turned into a drug house operation.
Yeah.
And it collapsed and it was worse. And we're still fighting the impacts of that horrible mistake. If we have custody, they've got to have a plan. They've got to accept responsibility. They ought to, and they have to have that case management that gives them that mentoring, help them with that planning and guidance. And yeah, there's no substitute for a functioning family.
Yeah.
But the alternative is no controls and downward spiral into drugs and illness. So
That generates another RFP thought for me, because I totally agree. I think if you're helping a child and they need to be involved with the community, either got a job or they're doing something like both commissioners have talked about. So then I would say, well, in the RFP, how are we going to utilize these kids in the community? How are we going to work with the community to give them some self-worth to do some things? I remember Frank talked about the body shop, letting them do some stuff in the kitchen. But I would think there's other businesses around that would want to help and give these kids something that gives them the self-worth that my colleagues are talking about.
Well, on a side, it's much like you're talking there, Rick. One of my clients down in Vancouver, one of their workers, they take underserviced, underprivileged children and they get them into building airplanes out the Hillsborough Airport. And this guy comes to me, he's in his 80s now and he's still working. And he talks about how so many of these kids have gone on and they were either homeless or in poverty level where they had nothing. They had absolutely nothing. And they took them in, they got them tools. Everyone had a certain part of this single engine airplane that they were working on. They learned how to read the schematics or the plans. They learned how to turn a wrench. And the stories of these kids having a self-worth as you talk about and what they were able to do and where they've ended up now. This has been going on for like 10, 15 years now. And some are pilots, some are car mechanics, but it's just changed those kids' lives. So I completely agree with you. Everybody from adult to young adults need to feel like they're contributing and something they do to get self-worth. That's where we've erred so much on some of these other issues as far as homeless.
Yeah.
But this is something that if you can attack is the wrong word. You can look at right now and stop that molehill from becoming a mountain and assist those kids, whether it's 24 or it's 5 or down the road, it's 100 kids that graduate through that program.
Yeah.
You've done something good.
I think it's an important part of somebody helping themselves and moving out of those type of situations. So if I see our RFPs come in, I'm going to want to see how do they address that and how they're going to help these kids move.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you a real data out of Head Start. 2 or 3 years ago, we funded LCC Head Start over my objection. Why? I did some homework. I looked around, talked to people, found somebody who had been a 10-year employee of Head Start. And I asked them about the program. I said, well, they had 19 families they dealt with in the morning, 19 families in the afternoon. And for 10 years, that adds up to 380 families with which they dealt. I asked, okay, how'd that work out? And she explained, well, you talk to them and then the kids would go back to the home or something like that. And it wasn't a good home environment. Make a long story short, the assessment was that out of those 380 families, this person felt that she was able to benefit one family, maybe 2. And we can champion that one family and say, oh, wonderful. But that is a very seductive issue. Let me give, did you want to?
No,
jump
I
in
was
on
just gonna say, I think that's why you put measurement standards in place. whether they're yearly measurement standards or, every 2 years or every 5 years. Any business, you have to have reporting and a measurement standard that you're hitting your goal. If you're not, then you have an issue, right?
Right, and you're spot on, but I have been unable to get what I would call adequate measurement standards. In the private world, it doesn't really matter what standards you have, because if you have the wrong ones, you're out of business
That's
at
right.
some point. Here, we just reach to the taxpayer pocket, and that is what we've been doing for decades. I could digress on that. One other issue, it's still, I am very uncomfortable saying, yeah, you deserve our help. You don't deserve our help, or you deserve our help, but he deserves it more. And that is a very tough thing. I do not like to put myself in that situation, and I assiduously avoid doing that. One way to do that is we spend or we get about $2 million a year. And we could quibble about that in terms of permit fees. And when you talk to someone trying to build a house, permit fees are a noticeable function of the problem, of the cost. And so one thing I think we could do, if we wanted to do it, is in the name of Lady Justice with the blindfold, is simply you build a single family home or a quad apartment, something like that. You get your occupancy permit and we will refund you all the permit fees that we charged you. That is an incentive that is completely blind to any of our own biases of any kind. The bias is already right in the statement. You build it, we will refund you the cost.
Thank you. I want to make sure everybody else has a
Yep,
chance
thank you.
to testify.
you.
And those of you who are attending over the line, be sure and use your raised hand code so we can bring you into the meeting. Anyone else? Welcome.
Hi, my name is Tanika Hinton. I've
And
lived,
Nika, you need to
Oh,
get
sorry.
really close. You'll hear when you get close enough, there's kind of a, it hears back.
okay, there we go. My name is Tanika Hinton. I am a resident of here, Cowlitz County, my whole life. I also work at Core Health. So I'm just gonna tell a little bit of my story. So coming into a family living here in Cowlitz County, I entered to, my family has generational addiction and mental health issues. So coming in right out of the gate, statistically, I was set up for failure. With both my parents being addicts, that's just the numbers. So, sorry, I'm nervous. So with my family being addicts and mental health issues, dealing with homelessness constantly, I was in and out of foster care, in and out of the system, living with grandparents, wondering where my next meal is going to be, where I'm going to sleep, getting bullied at school because I wore the same clothes for years upon years, or them being too small or too big. And around the age of 14, I landed into a mental health facility because I tried ending my life with both my mental health and chemical dependency issues that I had. Around that time, I had self-reported my mom and my younger siblings. I had put in a CPS report because that's when I found my voice. And then with leaving there, I went to foster care. And I was reunited with my sisters at the community house and along with my mom. We lived at the community house for about a year. My mom successfully became employed while living at the community house, and we successfully got housed. My time at the community house, I was still battling with my mentally and my addiction issues as well. With the help of their case managers, their mental health professionals, their substance use counselors as well, I was able to stop using substances. And with that support that I have never really had, I was able to overcome that. And while living at the community house, I also found out I was pregnant. So we all know how that goes, a pregnant teenager. So there's two roads I can go down. I can go down and let my kid go into foster care, or I can go graduate, get a better education, take care of my kid. So what I did is I used my past traumas and turned it into a success. I graduated high school with a 2-year-old daughter. I graduated in 2020. My mom had relapsed right before my graduation, leaving myself homeless, my daughter homeless, and my sister's homeless. And so I had nowhere to go at all. I had fallen in a really bad domestic violence situation with my daughter's dad, and seeing domestic violence in the house, and you're stuck no matter what you do until you hit your breaking point and you decide to leave. Well, one night I found myself at my breaking point and I left with me and my daughter. We slept in our car. Me only being 16 years old with a almost 2-year-old in my car was really hard. I had absolutely nowhere to go with me and my daughter. We were constantly couch surfing. And then that's when I heard about the community house Core Health expanding outside of the community house, and I turned for help with the people who had helped me in the past. Now they offered me a job. I've been there 2 going on 3 years. I have my own place for 2 years now, and it's crazy, but it makes me feel amazing because I accomplished those things by myself. And with my family being constantly suffering with mental health and addiction, I don't really have any family, but we get to choose our families who care and who love us no matter what. And Core Health has become my family. So now I work at Core Health. I also take care of my 2 younger siblings because our parents are actively in addiction. And with having 2 younger siblings and their teenagers, it's hard to say no to those kids. And so I constantly am hearing about the battles of children, their substance use, and I relate a lot to that because I was that child. I had, coming out of the gate, my life was a failure. I was going to fail. I was going to do drugs. But with the help of the community house and Core Health, I was able to get past that. And I was able to put all my trauma behind me and pull that power. And I got to show everybody the other side that you can go. No matter what, as a child of an addict, you are destined to either go one way or the other. And unfortunately, it's more of the other way than the right way. And it's hard. These children need that example of, I have been there. I know exactly what you're going through, and this is how we can help. And being that an example, I have, by just being an example for my sisters, they're completely the straight A students. They go to school every day, straight A students. They don't do any drugs or alcohol, and they're excelling. One's only a freshman in high school, and she's already gotten college offers because of her grades and her excellence. And without people to look up to and say, I am here for you, we're set up for failure. We really are.
Well, let me say, first of all, you've done an amazing job of talking about something that's very difficult to talk about.
Yeah, sorry.
You're courageous. Thank you for sharing. I think what you've touched on is one of the keystones of everything that we've talked about.
Mhm.
It's about developing somehow that relationship that holds people accountable in a mutually supporting way. And a lot of people don't have the traditional mother and father to do that for lots of different reasons that we've talked about. The government has a very difficult time doing that. It ends up being foster care and juvie, and those are not necessarily good models. Some foster parents are absolutely wonderful. I get that.
Mhm.
But you get to a certain age and it's very difficult.
Most definitely.
And there's also maybe not a guarantee that even this proposal will work.
Mhm.
That's why we need the narratives that say, how are we going to do that? And prepare these young adults for work and responsibility and being the model that
Yeah.
youngers can look up to. So I hear what you're saying. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
You know, sometimes what we forget because we look at simple one-on-one type numbers, that on either side of the ledger, if I used to have a saying in work, and it wasn't anything earth-shattering or anything, but if you have a pie and you have one piece of it is bad, you need to cut it out because it's going to ruin the other pieces. And we forget that one bad person probably influences bad behavior in others. And we forget that a person with demonstrating correct behavior also has influence with others. So it's not always a one-on-one thing. It's more of a multiplier. And we have to keep that in mind at times. And
My name is Trisha Johnston.
Michelle?
Hello. This issue came about a few months ago. I am the director of Core Health Support Center. I'm Tanika's boss as well. What was happening and what continues to happen is that we have a lot of youth that don't have anywhere to go at night. I get phone calls from people I supervise. Hey, I got an 18-year-old, I got a 17-year-old. Can we put them in a hotel room? Can we put them here? And the basis for that is we need to know where to find them to help people. If we can't get somebody to sit still for 24 hours for a week, we can't start a process with helping anybody. 24 beds is half of what Hope Village has. And there's so many resources that these kids need to be exposed to. LCC is an amazing resource that kids can be exposed to. The military is an amazing opportunity. You want to talk about self-esteem and having a part in something? Well, serving your country is a great thing. But they don't have these opportunities because they get into addiction and they commit crimes, and then they're not even it's not even an option. So we need to give these kids a place to go and not get these criminal pasts. We need to give them a chance to lay their heads down. And, Tanika came into me and she worked part-time at Jimmy John's and needed housing. And I looked at her and said, you need a job. You can't afford housing with part-time at Jimmy John's. And the reason I asked Frank to hire her is because the way her daughter behaved. Her 2-year-old daughter was so well behaved. And we have, then an 18-year-old gal who doesn't have a home and her daughter is so well behaved. How is that happening? Well, because she's giving her daughter what her mom didn't give her. And there's a saying in the NA community, and it's that the children have no choice. These children are born into these circumstances, and then parents leave. Teachers are fostering kids, like we know. CPS is just drained. They're tapped out. Getting a child removed that absolutely needs to be removed from a home is nearly impossible because there's nowhere for them to go. We run around and beat our heads against the wall because we can't find somewhere for kids to go. We just can't. And so where do they go? Trap houses, where drugs are, finding friends' houses, getting kicked out of there, they're getting pregnant. All of these things are happening because there's just no parental supervision.
There are plenty of adults who want to mentor, but
Mhm.
it's selfish mentoring.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes. Yep. And so I told Tanika, you need a job. So we hired her. She failed to mention that she takes care of her two sisters who are teenagers, her daughter on $20 an hour. That's paying rent. She doesn't get a voucher because she makes too much money. She does this because her mom doesn't. And that's what's happening. This is falling on grandparents. It's falling on family members, and the parents are just oblivious. And you know, I'm a drug court graduate. I've taken community resources in this town extremely seriously. I wrote a letter to Sue Bauer to get into drug court, and I promised her something, and it was that I wasn't going to mess up. And it's been 9 years. So I supervise 34 peer support counselors, and a peer support counselor is somebody who's qualified and certified through the state to share their lived experience. So, you know, people go to college. Yep, that's great. They have student loans. We go to prison. We get LFOs. We have attorney's fees. We earn our lived experience as well by every single choice we make. And it's amazing that the state has qualified us to then step beside somebody. Tanika could step beside someone and say, you know what, I was 16 and pregnant living at the community house, and now I'm taking care of my two sisters and my daughter. I'm working a full-time job and I'm trying to go to college. Foster care also provides tuition. They cover tuition for kids. And this isn't something that everybody knows. Kids in foster care, they don't know those things. But if we get them to sit down for a minute and find a support group and have just a little bit of clarity and just feel wanted, they might be open to the fact that they could go to college. Building affordable housing in my opinion, is a Band-Aid. We need to educate these kids. We need to get them involved in the military or in some sort of something that they're not going to be looking for a voucher to be on affordable housing down the road. We want them to be better, right? We want them to hold positions in office and to look outside of these things. But if they catch felonies and if they have a criminal record before they turn 18, they're done. They can't use that lived experience to change policy or to get into office or to serve their country. And that's a shame. It's a shame. And you know, Frank has this direct line to God. That's what I say. And you know, when I went to him, I said, we need a list of respite homes. We need a list of families that are willing to just let these kids sleep at their home. Parents they get so fed up with these kids that they say, get out, you know? Well, we need somewhere for them to go, and give that family just a little bit of a break, and then let us work with them. Let us get in there and help these kids, just like we helped Tanika. She is a success story over and over again. She keeps taking kids into her house, and she can't afford that. I mean, it's so hard for me because I'm like, you can't do this. You can't take these kids home. You can't do this.
So I've got a little bit of a question for you. Again, thank you for your
Yeah.
testimony.
Mhm.
It's all very important. Mr. Mortensen shared with us his turmoil at picking winners and losers.
Mhm.
What's your answer to him for that? Because we may be considering a program.
Yeah.
Dollars to finance are finite.
Yeah.
What's the best kind of program to meet
Well, we pick
his concern?
We pick winners and losers when we're doing affordable housing too, because if somebody has a felony or they have a criminal background, they're excluded from any housing. So if they've got that on their record from when they were little or young or unsupervised, the housing authority is picking and choosing too. And it's not because they want to, but it's the federal parameters. It's the rules. And so, yeah, there's picking and choosing, but at this point, we have to, I believe we need to give an option. We need to give a safe place for people to not be excluding themselves down the road.
I think you're avoiding the question. The question isn't what HouseWA does or what other agencies do.
Mhm.
Question is simply, you've got two people coming to you, you got one spot,
Mm.
now you got to play God. And I think he was asking for, what's your take on that? What's your advice on that?
Yeah, well, I know what we would do, and we're going to try and find somewhere for that other kid to go until we got a spot for him. So if somebody shows up and they want help, we're going to find somewhere to go. Tanika calls her Young Life. mentor and we get them placed there for 3 weeks until we get a bed. We find places for these kids to go if they want help. None of these kids are going to go in there fighting if they don't want to, you know? So yeah, if they show up for help, we're going to find resources to fill that gap until we can get them in so they can get help.
So one of the critical things is somewhere in the process we've used the word exclude, but really the other way is to protect
Mhm.
the kids from an even worse alternative. Where do they go if they don't get the help, the mentoring, into a relationship? They go to where the drugs are.
Oh, absolutely.
predators, and all those kinds of things.
Yes.
But the bottom line is, if we go forward with what Frank proposed, it's 24 beds.
Mhm. A start.
It's got room for 60.
I mean, it's,
Stats, 50 foot per square,
mhm.
50 square foot per person. Community house started in 1988.
Let's make sure, because we want to get that testimony
Yeah.
information on the record. So that's
So I guess, I've worked for Frank for almost 8 years
Mhm.
and I'm saying, give us a chance. I think the cap, I don't know for him. I haven't talked, I just knew about this meeting from meeting with him yesterday. I think the capital thing is cool because everything that we've been given, we support. We keep it going. We're expanding during COVID. We're hiring, we're buying buildings, we're making this work. He's the best fundraiser I've ever seen. And the community support, I watch these meetings at night at home. They say, fund the community house. The community house, fund the community house. I'm watching it up there. So the community is speaking and they do see it. They know what we're doing. And I think it's a good option.
great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Robert Toms, and I currently reside in Tacoma, Washington. The reason why I'm coming to speak to you today is I just recently left serving on the Tacoma City Council for 10 years, and we wrestled with some of the challenges that you are discussing today. And I really appreciate the time and detailed nature of how you're digging into where you might invest scarce resources. And the reason why I'm speaking is because I believe the model that Frank and his team have come up with, while not necessarily innovative, it is for the state of Washington in so much as they're trying to provide accountability and recovery, whereas the state of Washington, for most of the elected bodies that I've worked with, are going with a housing first model. And while I think housing is extremely important, I think for adults, it's been a challenge, and it's non-existent for children, for youth. What they need is sheltering and something that can take care of them 24 hours a day. And I ran into Frank sort of exploring what we might do in Tacoma. And when you talk about size, the two largest ones in the city of Tacoma, which has maybe a 5 to 7-fold larger problem than you have, are 12 beds for youth 12 to 17. And then our largest one, Arlington, which is funded largely through the Tacoma Housing Authority with county and city funds, goes from 18 to 24, where they have 90 beds. So the goal is to take those 12 kids that are in the most intensive need of sheltering and then move them to where they don't have to go into the other shelter when they turn 18. So I think 24 is reasonably, if not incredibly ambitious for a community of your size. And I think it's built upon the success that they've had with your youth center that is only a couple of years old, that has a tremendous amount of subscribed teenagers to that. And so I think, while I don't know that I would agree that you're picking winners and losers necessarily, but I think you're hearing from a potential partner that has been a partner with you in the past, has run these programs without resources from the county, and is trying to expand upon their youth center in a place that is very close in proximity to where they could take some of the kids that they turn away every night that could stay there. And if I understand the fee structure, which I don't know exactly, we've had some years when we had surpluses in some of these, but I think from a taxpayer's perspective, while they do not like paying the taxes, they certainly don't like you having a surplus of it. So I think the fact that you have what appears to be at least a year and a half or more of surplus speaks to why doing something sooner rather than later is important. And if you have a viable project to go for, I think that's a laudable thing for you to do. And in this case, you would be building something that your region's underserved. In the Great River region, which is 5 counties, you only have one youth center, and the closest one's about 70 miles from here. So if a child were at the youth center and wanted to go to a shelter, they would have to go 70 miles to find, a housing that is appropriate for youth. The youth that I'm talking about are under 17. So
Vancouver does have a program, doesn't it?
Vancouver, yeah, Clark County does have
Right.
some. True.
That's
The ones
40
in your,
miles.
the ones in your region, only one in your regional service area is in Grays Harbor.
Mhm.
And so in theory, the state tries to put these in bite-sizable chunks, as you know. And so, and less than half of our 39 counties even have a shelter at all. So I think what you've done, and I drove in Tacoma today to speak on behalf of what I believe is Frank's model of recovery and accountability, I think is extremely important because in my mind, if you don't have that accountability, you're never going to get to the prevention phase. And what largely these folks have spoken before me have talked about is that an ounce of prevention, right? And I believe the housing first strategy is a little threadbare with the taxpayers because they see bill upon bill, money upon money. The most money in the history of the world was just shot out of the federal canon over the last 2 years. And we have a larger problem than we had before because you can't bring enough units online. And I've yet to go into a room and say, do you think your house is affordable? No one, the term affordable housing doesn't exist, really. I mean, there's subsidized housing, which I think you spoke to, Chair. And as soon as we have more people be honest about that, say, if you want to subsidize it, we can have as much of it as you want. It's just going to be subsidized because developers are building this stuff. In my city alone, we're thinking we're going to have about 45 to 5,500 units online within the next year over what's been a historic amount of growth per unit, but none of it's affordable unless we go with this new aggressive 20-year MFT. And to a lesser degree, we've had applicants use our 12-year, which gives them some amount of multifamily tax credit. So a long way of saying, I think you have a private sector partner, which I wish we had more of in my community, that is proven that they are able to do this and they're looking to expand. I think Frank yelled out something about his numbers of size. It is true. He could probably go larger, but I think for the need that they serve right now, I think going 24 to see what you need, because you'd want to separate these youth, girls and boys. And then it causes challenges with duplication of staff because you need someone to monitor the girls and monitor the boys, would be twice as much as what we're doing in the city of Tacoma, because our largest one is 12. So I just put that into perspective because I believe Frank is a trailblazer in the state of Washington. And I believe he's on to something with this recovery model towards sustainability for people, not just providing housing options. Because I think what you spoke to, Commissioner, was that this is a breakdown in many cases of the family. And you've heard other people say you can't choose your family, but you can choose. Well, I would argue you can't choose your family, but you can choose your community. And the communities that serve people well are going to be the places that people want to live. And having left my house today, and what I consider to be one of the nicest neighborhoods in Tacoma, I saw more homelessness in the stadium district than I did sitting downtown in your city today for 2 hours. I didn't see any. Now that just could be the part of town I was in, but at the same time, it feels like you guys have been doing something right for several years now. And I think you can build upon that by supporting projects like Frank's. I don't think it needs to exclude others, but if I heard your number right, you're expecting to potentially have $1 million per year in these fees. You have $1.7 million in surplus currently. I would just offer, if you do an RFP, which is smart of any political body because it gives you, covers your bases that nobody was left out, but try to do it as expeditiously as possible, as focused as possible, to where whether you choose affordable housing or a youth shelter, I would argue focus it towards youth in this one. And maybe it doesn't use the entirety of your surplus, but do it as soon as possible because you've got some momentum going here. And I think it's worth keeping that momentum. And I appreciate you letting me speak to you. I don't know that you have any questions for me, but if you do, I'll answer any.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Yes, sir.
Thank you
very much.
Good afternoon.
So just a point of order, was this supposed to be a repeat of support community house on Broadway, or are we trying to resolve something?
So
for
I think as
HHS to answer
the
a question?
council member mentioned at the tail end, he got it back to if we do go for RFP, focus it on youth. So eventually we'll
Okay,
ask if you ask, is that your intent as well?
do you have the answer to whatever you need in order to proceed?
I believe so. I think I heard some comments to maybe make it a more broad RFP. We could include some specification if the board wants to, including, we have a particular interest in youth projects, for example. So we could do that, and I could wordsmith some language around those options. In terms of a budget amount, and I did take notes on some other comments that Commissioner Dahl had about looking at community impact and how would we include something about that in the proposal. So I can look more at that piece as well. The budget question I had is still sort of lingering out there, but we have limited amounts of document recording fees available. So I guess that was more my concern of just to make sure that we're thoughtful of that. I think we have done RFPs both ways in the past where we have set an amount and where we have left a specific amount out. But I just want us to be mindful that we do have, we have limited amount of funds available.
So do you need a number, or?
No.
What you said sounds pretty good to me.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have done it both ways in the past where we have set that, as long as we're just being thoughtful of that.
Commissioner Dahl, does that sound good?
Yeah, I think that's what you explained there. I think you got the gist of what we're asking.
Okay. So thank you. Point well taken. Thank you.
And one other, I do favor a focus on the youth. I'm not sure I know how to handle that, but.
Yeah, I would favor that too. So however you may put that in there, that we're particularly interested in youth solutions, maybe. I don't know how you want to do that. But
Okay. I could take a
we're
look at
not going to
that.
exclude everybody, but that is
Sure.
a focus of ours.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
So a wise member of this commission has often said, if you know you're on the winning side, you don't have to keep talking.
I'll go ahead and step away.
Just saying. Sorry about that. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to weigh in on recommending how we set up the RFP for the use of our document recording fees? Be sure and use the raised hand function. We will promote you and get your comments.
On the Q&A, there's a statement that has puzzled me. It's not a question. It's the last one, wrong management, note to
yeah.
wrong management.
Don't know what that means.
I have no idea what that means. I think almost categorically, that's always true.
We have one person we haven't heard from. I just want to double check with you. You're okay? Okay, all right. Last time, anyone else? So Gina, what kind of timeline are we looking at? Because we'll have to approve the final, but we usually would do that in workshop rather than a formal meeting, right?
So up to the board, I can bring a draft back and for you to take a look at or send it to you ahead of time to take a look at before we schedule the official posting.
Mhm.
I have to look at my calendar.
Yeah, I think you want to send it individually. We'll look
Sure.
at it.
Sure.
And
Sure.
then we'll still want to meet kind of like we've met here.
Okay.
Yeah, perhaps the week after next. That'll give us a chance to look at it personally then.
Okay.
Kelly, perhaps one of our workshops, we can set aside this review of the RFP.
We have the 18th and the 3rd of February, or sorry, the 1st of February.
The 1st of February. Okay, 1st of February, I think works. All right. Will that work with you?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
You're supposed to say, if you get back to me.
That's true.
Okay. Super. Up. Jennifer Westerman, the person for whom Southwest Washington Public Housing is dependent, is asked to speak. Welcome,
Certainly.
Jennifer.
Thank you. Certainly not alone. I just wanted to reiterate that I really would appreciate.
Just so that the folks listening and know,
Yeah.
you are the director of the local housing authority, correct?
I am the CEO of Housing Opportunities of Southwest Washington, which is the housing authority of the city of Longview.
Thank
And
you.
we cover 4 counties. And I just wanted to say thank you for the good conversation. And I also really appreciate when there is a public process, an RFP process, because it provides transparency for those of us that are out in the field trying to figure out how this funding type of award is made. So I appreciate that. I also reiterate the need for youth services. We've also stepped into the arena a little, just a tiny wet foot with a foster youth initiative program, which helps to provide vouchers to people exiting foster care. And so I'm sure that Frank will be sending us some referrals for those vouchers in the future.
He just got a smile on his face. Yes, I think he will. All right.
That's all.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good to hear from you. Anyone else? Any other final comments, gentlemen? Any other matters to be brought to our attention? All right, seeing no responses. Again, thank you so much for the discussion. I think it was excellent. This meeting is adjourned.